All right, here we go. Back for the reading. We're keeping up the schedule. I'm proud of myself because I usually don't keep these schedules up, but I am trying to push out as much information as I can because the fact of the matter is I don't know how many days I have. It's getting rough, and this housing situation is temporary, so we'll see. This reading, one of my favorites, Eric Erickson. I got this from the library today. All the books I like in the library when I go, they're always downstairs in the basement. Um, they always have to go get them from the basement. I told the lady today that's where the good stuff is. She said that's where the dusty stuff is. I said that's the good stuff. Um, when I was going back to learn psychology, Eric Erickson was my favorite. I had a mentor who said, well, "Who do you like?" He was studying Erickson, Gardner. It was between Gardner and Erickson or Jung. Jung is really the when you want to go to the next levels. But as far as practical psychoanalysis, I like Eric Erickson because he dealt with development, and at each age you develop a certain way, and if you don't develop properly out of each stage, you have lingering problems. So Erickson was my guy. There's a section that I want to read about children. Very important. We're probably going to go in another section because I'm going to be reading all week. But this section is short. Oh. Not all of us who work with children as teachers, as would-be healers, venture much beyond our usual bounds. Inevitably, we go to schools, to hospitals, and clinics, there to learn about the young, to assist them in learning about themselves, or in a classroom about a subject matter. And there sometimes even to learn from them, to hear their questions, the thoughts and concerns on their minds. What we are told offers clues, but also reminders. We are brought back in time to our earlier lives, to the curiosities we once harbored, the wonder about the world, brought back to, in the poet William Blake's words, become Erickson's in childhood and society. The toys and reasons we once found so compelling, distracting, and so often instructive, not only for the present, but for the lifetime that followed those first years. When young Erickson started teaching school children in Vienna, he often asked the children to draw even as he himself loved to draw. And he often tried to stir them to imagine how others their age lived. The Eskimos in distant Americas, Alaska, had captured his attention, interest, and he labored hard to connect the boys and girls in his classroom with those far away. There were books about those youngsters who lived amid abundant snow and ice, and determined teacher succeeded in bringing an Arctic world into that Central Europe, as he once recalled with some pride. I knew of my own desire to study the Eskimos by reading about them, and I knew I had thoughts, or better, hope, that one day I'd go see people whose life I'd be exploring secondhand through the interest in them of others, his students. I remember being surprised by the attention the children paid, more so than to our routine work. Maybe that was it. We were taking a break, taking a long trip across European land and the ocean, and the American land and Canadian land. I was teaching geography with the help of Eskimos, and they, the school children, became absorbed. That's the word. Besides geography, they were learning to spell the strange names of peoples and places. And they were learning history and current events. What had happened to the Eskimos and what was happening in the world that could affect them. Did you learn like this? Do you know anyone who learned like this? Is your child learning like this? And if the answer is no, 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 that's the problem. That's the problem. Because if we learned like this in the United States, if we taught like this, that's why when I do my classes, I try to use these books and this information to put it on the ground in reality, and make people understand. Now I teach for adults. Make it concrete. But if we taught like this, you could end the social racism and prejudices in one generation. You really could, if you were serious about it. Now, policy-wise, you'd have to do some other things that in structural. Well, actually, all that's fell apart. So we just have to build new structures that don't have it built in. Do what we're not used to. Let's keep going. We were studying art too, of course, looking at pictures and trying to sketch our own versions. I kept saying an artist finds something interesting with his eyes. His eyes, I said back then, and then tries to show himself or someone else looking over his shoulder. What there is to see and keep in mind. I once told Anna Freud during an analytic hour that I was trying to encourage the children to be sovereigns, to stake out their personal claim to what their eyes had noticed in books. She laughed. She said that the children would welcome what I was doing, but they might be frightened, put off, because they'd already learned the big lesson in school, to follow the teacher's lead, not be their own guide. That was a big discussion for sure, and it had psychoanalytic echoes to it. Individuality as against conformity. I still remember that hour. Maybe my whole career was beginning then. I wanted to stay within the conventional and the established, but I wanted to, too well, go see for myself, which was what I was encouraging the children to do. He most certainly did go see for himself. By the time he was in his early 30s, he had at least a diploma in hand, one from Vienna Psychoanalytic Institute, and he had learned a great deal about children as a psychoanalyst who worked with them, but also as a teacher who tried to help them do the intellectual and emotional work that takes place in a school. It should. Well, it does, but not in any good way. In fact, upon his arrival in the United States, those Eskimos would still be in his thinking, even as he went out of his way to get to meet and know children not unlike them in certain respects. Native American boys and girls growing up under the authority of a nation, yet with attachments to customs, loyalties to the received messages of tribal elders, who by no means had the same preoccupations, values, aspirations that were to be found in, say, Cambridge, Massachusetts, or New York City, where newly arrived psychoanalysts like himself were fast beginning to catch a foothold. The result was field work, extended visits to the Sioux Indians in the Dakotas, to the Yurok in California, and eventually the lively, even entrancing writing such people prompted from their wide-eyed, quite attentive visitor, who had by then not only mastered psychoanalytic observation, but the distinct lyrical possibilities of the English language. So it would begin, a fine writer's career with wonderfully suggestive phrases like hunters across the prairie and fishermen along the river, descriptions of the far away that helped illuminate what was going on nearby in various children as they learned their toys and reason. The psychoanalyst who wrote with such engaging eloquence had begun to know his new nation, of which he'd be a citizen for the rest of his life. With a thoroughness, with a willingness to look wide across a great land, to learn from its children in such a way that their various circumstances got realized as the persuasive forces in their young lives. Hence his eventual assertion that childhood is much shaped by the society in which a boy or girl lives. A discovery that was, for Erikson and later for the rest of us, important and helpful to contemplate, even as Freud had asked to think of certain other aspects of the lives of our sons and daughters or school children. And that's still the case. Because you have brilliant children, and sometimes they're ruined by bad adults, parents who abandon. And I will say now, with all of the social media and all of the outlets, you're less I shouldn't say you're less influenced by your house, but you do know that you have alternatives to what's going on in your house. But having blockheads for parents will still always be a hindrance, because it's your home. It's where you go to sleep. It's where you wake up. It's where you spend. I know in New York City, most of your time, where you just opened yourself up. Because in New York City, you have to be tight, tough. You have to be aware. You have to be, always, hey, what's your angle? What's your angle? But at home, you can relax. But if you have to be like that at home and outside, it can weigh you down. And if you're not like that at home and you got blockheads for parents, some of their insanity can leak into you, can affect you, can be a bad influence on you. So childhood is very, very important. How it is. And Erikson does something really, really important here that all psychologists should do. If they're not doing this for you, get a different one. Put you in the social context. If they're just telling you what to do for yourself and not for yourself in a context, they're no good. You're going to end up frustrated. Well, you might end up going back to them for 100 visits. But it really doesn't make sense for a psychologist to do that, because you're going to come back anyway, because there's always going to be problems. But if you're not helping them to solve the problems in real time in the society with what's going on around them, then you're not helping them. And that's another reason why I stopped studying. Yes, I was going to be a psychologist. I was in a master's program that would have allowed me certification to be a psychologist, to be a therapist. But I quit. For one, I was running up student debt. Two, I wanted to primarily work with Black people, which that's who I would work with, because let's be honest, I doubt that anybody else would have hired me to talk to. If white people don't think we're human beings, why would they go to a Black therapist? Although I'm sure some do, but it's probably more rare. And I realized that Black people really couldn't be helped through talk therapy, large amounts, or at least at that time when I was going through it, I felt couldn't be helped. And I would stand by that. We have to be shocked into being helped. We learned in when I went to school for psychology, we learned that they can still give shock therapy. It's like, if I remember right, it's 1/10 of a second that they shock your brain. So they hook these things up to your brain and they shock a certain area and it brightens everything up again. That's how people explain it. And people who suffer from chronic depression usually get this shock therapy. But it's like, it has to be like 1/10 of 1 second, very quick. And because that part of the brain just gets dull. And we know that now through technology. Putting things up to the brain and seeing what lights up when certain things happen, when you look at certain things, what an average human being's brain should look like when they're generally happy or in the normal state. and they could tell who's more depressed by what areas of the brains are not lit up, and so they shock you. I just think black folks at this point need to be shocked. As a matter of fact, um, especially, well, I wouldn't even say if you're poor and black. If you're black, period, from my talking to them, and I've talked to different classes of blacks, we all need to be shocked. Well, I'm not gonna say we all need to be shocked, but a lot of them need to be shocked. They just need to be shocked back into me. Now, most of them are not gonna do that. Healthcare doesn't willy-nilly hand out shock therapy. It has to be special cases. But we are being shocked by events, especially climate change. It rains, it shuts the city down. That's a shock. 2020 was a shock. It shocked us. It showed us how life should be, how life should look. And we've gone back again. But I think these other little mini shutdowns, the climate change clauses, and I think these are another little shock treatments. When it's hot in October, shock treatment. You know what I mean? Cold in May, shock treatment. Because it's showing you that there's something big in the world, and it's screaming to you, it's forcing you out of your dull and depressed and repressed and regressive brain that we have in this country, in this society. So I hate that other animals are suffering from climate change, but I think it's the only thing that could help human beings. It's big actions that shock us, and it has to be something that's not just shocking for a day or a year. It has to be a transformative shocking. And then social institutions have to come in hard and continue whatever policies there were. They can't be soft and say, oh, the people not ready for this. Oh, we gotta, like in 2020, they should have never let people go back to work that weren't working, that weren't in essential jobs. They should have left them to have new careers, new activities. They should have gave them the resources, and all of us the resources, to work for ourselves. You know, I always say we should do a American Transition Act where we get $1,200 a month for 5 years for us to transition out of the old way into new careers and activities. And you know what a lot of people would do? They would start organizations that would solve a problem. Maybe they solve a homeless problem. Maybe they solve a mentally ill problem. Maybe they solve a domestic abuse problems. That's where it's at. I mean, that's where it's going anyway. Non-for-profit organizations that solve problems. NGOs. Up until this point, they've been doing a bad job because they haven't actually been solving problems. They've just been maintaining themselves. But if you let us loose and give us the resources, we'll create organizations that solve the problems. I created the Coniston Center as an alternative to the pipeline to prison that you're sending your children to, called schools. And nobody really supports it, but it's functional. And it's really good. It's a lot of material on that website, on my Patreon page. It's a lot of material for you to educate yourself, educate your children, and basically, you know, you can use it as an alternative. Well, you can use it as a supplement, which it would really actually be, sending them to school would be the supplement. The Patreon page would be the bulk of their knowledge. Let them go get babysat at school while you work, and then they be educated. You could pull them out of school and use it. I don't do the math and science portions, but science is everywhere, and math, you can use khanacademy.org for math. It's the best website, as far as I know, for that. So that's just 3 websites, two websites, you got a school, a complete school with all the subjects. And like I said, science is everywhere. Chemistry sets are not that expensive. And by the way, when you homeschool, you get tax breaks. It used to be $8,000. I don't know what it is now. $8,000 a year when you file for taxes. I'm not sure what it is today. It's probably more because counties that really want to close the schoolhouses down and do remote learning. They save a lot of money that way. And but that's an opportunity. Keep your children out of the schools. Keep your children out of the prisons. That's what I say. If you want to support any of these platforms, you can do so directly. Hit the links. Go to my Patreon page. And until next time, please try to take care of yourself. And please be safe because it's getting really rough. Take care.